Nobody expected a rideshare driver to become the reason a powerful woman stayed alive that night. The storm had already flooded half the city by the time Marcus finished his final ride. Rain hammered his windshield so hard he could barely see the road ahead, and every few seconds thunder rattled his old sedan like it might fall apart completely. He was exhausted. 16 straight hours behind the wheel had drained every ounce of energy from him. His back hurt, his eyes burned, and the gas light blinking on the dashboard reminded him he was almost out of money again. Still, he kept driving, because missing even one day of work meant falling behind on rent. Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel while scrolling through ride requests on his phone. Most drivers already went home because of the storm, but Marcus couldn't afford to stop early. Not tonight. As he turned onto a dark highway exit near downtown Chicago, something unusual caught his attention through the rain. Bright headlights reflecting off twisted metal. Then suddenly, a crashed SUV appeared near the roadside barrier. Marcus immediately slowed down. Cars ahead kept moving past the wreck without stopping. Some drivers glanced briefly before speeding away into the storm. Marcus felt tension build in his chest. He should keep driving too. People always warned him about situations like this. Dangerous highways, late-night accidents, getting blamed for things he didn't do. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Then he forbore at the prompting. Then lightning flashed across the road, and Marcus saw movement, a woman's hand weakly pressing against the wet pavement beside the vehicle. His heart dropped instantly. Thinking again, Marcus slammed on the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder. Rain exploded against him the moment he stepped out of the car. Wind howled across the empty highway while passing vehicles sprayed water in every direction. He shouted while running toward the wrecked SUV. "Can you hear me?" No answer. The front of the luxury vehicle was crushed badly against the guardrail. Smoke drifted from the damaged hood while shattered glass covered the road. Then Marcus saw her. A woman lying partially outside the driver's side door, unconscious. Wechen frisching the driver's door, unconscious. Rain soaked through her clothes while blood mixed with water near her forehead. Fear hit him immediately. Marcus grabbed his phone with trembling fingers and called emergency services while kneeling beside her. The dispatcher answered instantly. "I found a crash victim," Marcus said urgently. "She's not responding. Check if she's breathing." Marcus carefully leaned closer. Nothing. No breath. His pulse exploded with panic. "What do I do?" he asked desperately. "Check for a pulse." Marcus pressed shaking fingers against her neck. Nothing again. The dispatcher's voice became serious. "You need to begin CPR immediately." Marcus froze for one terrifying second. He barely remembered the training from years ago, a free CPR course he almost skipped because he was too busy working overtime. Now it was the only thing standing between life and death. Rain poured down harder as Marcus positioned both hands over her chest. Then he started compressions. 1. The storm drowned everything except the dispatcher counting through his phone. Marcus pushed harder while cars raced past without stopping. 14, 15, 16. Water soaked through his sleeves as pain spread through his arms. His breathing became heavier with every second, but he refused to stop. "Keep going," the dispatcher shouted. Marcus looked down at the unconscious woman beneath his hands. "Come on," he whispered desperately. "Please." Lightning cracked across the sky. Minutes passed. Still no pulse. But Marcus kept fighting for a stranger everyone else drove past, and he had no idea that the next few moments would change his entire life forever. Rain continued crashing against the highway while Marcus fought to keep the woman alive. Every second felt longer than the last. His arms burned from exhaustion, water soaked through his clothes, and his knees pressed painfully against the wet pavement. But he kept counting compressions exactly the way the dispatcher instructed through the phone. 30 compressions. Cars kept flying past without slowing down. The headlights flashed across the wrecked SUV for brief moments before disappearing into the darkness. Marcus barely noticed any more. His entire world narrowed down to one thing: keeping the woman breathing. "Emergency responders are 4 minutes away," the dispatcher said calmly. 4 minutes felt impossible. Marcus looked down at the woman's pale face while panic tightened inside his chest. "Come on," he whispered. "Stay with me." No response. Rainwater streamed across her forehead while thunder shook the road around them. Marcus pushed harder through the pain spreading into his shoulders. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. His hands trembled from exhaustion. The dispatcher's voice suddenly interrupted again. "Sir, do not stop. I'm trying," Marcus gasped. Then suddenly, the woman's body jerked violently beneath his hands. Marcus froze. A weak choking sound escaped her throat before she coughed hard, struggling to pull air into her lungs. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. "She's breathing." the dispatcher shouted excitedly. Keep her stable. The woman coughed again, confused and barely conscious. Her eyes opened weakly for a split second before closing again. She was alive. Marcus sat back against the rain-soaked pavement, breathing heavily, almost unable to process what just happened. 6 straight minutes of CPR, and somehow, it worked. Within moments, distant sirens echoed through the storm. Police cars and ambulances finally arrived, flooding the highway with flashing lights. Paramedics rushed toward the woman immediately, while officers secured the area around the crash. Marcus stepped back quietly, completely soaked and exhausted. One paramedic looked shocked after checking the woman's condition. Kept her alive this whole time. Marcus nodded tiredly. The paramedic stared at him carefully. Truce! Most people wouldn't have stopped. Before Marcus could answer, another medic suddenly looked up from the woman with surprise. Wait, he said quietly. Several responders exchanged glances. One police officer frowned. What is it? The paramedic lowered his voice. This is Victoria Langford. The atmosphere changed instantly. Even Marcus noticed it. Several officers suddenly recognized the name. One officer grabbed his radio immediately while another looked stunned. Victoria Langford wasn't just anyone. She was one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country, CEO of a billion-dollar investment company, famous across television, finance magazines, and national news. Marcus stared in disbelief. He had just spent 6 minutes performing CPR on someone the entire country knew. Paramedics carefully loaded Victoria into the ambulance while officers gathered information from Marcus about the crash. You're the one who found her? An officer asked. Marcus nodded and performed CPR. For booty boring? Performed CPR? The officer looked genuinely impressed. You probably saved her life tonight. Marcus looked down quietly, still trying to process everything himself. As the ambulance doors closed, Victoria suddenly moved weakly inside. One medic leaned closer to hear her, then turned back toward Marcus. She keeps asking for the man who saved her. Marcus froze completely. Rain still poured across the flashing highway lights, as every eye slowly turned toward the exhausted rideshare driver, standing alone beside his old car. And deep down, Marcus felt something strange, like his life had just shifted in a direction he never saw coming. 3 days after the accident, Marcus still couldn't believe any of it was real. News stations across Chicago continued covering Victoria Langford's miraculous survival. Headlines called it impossible. Doctors admitted she likely would have died if CPR had started even 1 minute later. And somehow, the man responsible was a rideshare driver barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. Marcus tried ignoring the attention, but it followed him everywhere. Passengers recognized him from social media clips. Strangers thanked him at gas stations. Local reporters kept calling his phone asking for interviews he didn't want to give. To Marcus, he simply did what anyone should have done. But deep down, anyone should have done. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true, because dozens of cars passed the crash before he stopped. On the 4th morning after the accident, Marcus received a phone call from a private number while sitting inside his parked sedan. Mr. Carter, a woman asked politely. Yes, Ms. Langford would like to meet you. Marcus froze instant. A black luxury car arrived outside his apartment building less than an hour later. Nervous neighbors peeked through windows while Marcus stepped inside wearing the nicest clothes he owned. The car drove downtown toward one of the tallest buildings in the city, Langford Global Headquarters. Marcus stared upward in disbelief as security escorted him through marble hallways, filled with executives and employees who all seemed to recognize him immediately. Finally, the doors opened into a quiet private office overlooking the skyline. Victoria Langford stood near the window, elegant, but the moment she turned toward Marcus, her expression softened completely. That's him, she whispered quietly. Marcus suddenly felt nervous for the first time since the accident. Victoria walked closer slowly. You stayed, she said softly. Marcus nodded once. Of course. Her eyes became emotional immediately. Most people wouldn't have. Room fell silent. Then, unexpectedly, Victoria stepped forward and hugged him tightly. Marcus stood frozen in shock while executives nearby exchanged stunned looks. You saved my life, she whispered. Several seconds neither moved. Then Victoria finally stepped back and looked directly at him. I read your file, she fell. Marcus frowned slowly with a påfågel på fåselobstreds. I read your file, she said carefully. Marcus frowned slightly. My file? You work almost 18 hours a day, he continued. No health insurance, 2 jobs before rideshare driving, engineering classes you had to quit because you couldn't afford tuition. Marcus looked uncomfortable hearing his struggles spoken aloud. Victoria noticed immediately. You shouldn't have had to sacrifice your future just to survive, she said quietly. Marcus lowered his eyes. Life happens. No, Victoria replied firmly. People get ignored. That sentence hit harder than he expected. Victoria walked toward her desk and picked up a folder. Then she owned it slowly. Inside was a full university scholarship for mechanical engineering, completely funded by the Langford Foundation. His hands started shaking. I don't understand. Victoria smiled softly. You gave me 6 minutes when everyone else kept driving, she said. Pourquoi? I'd like to give you your future back. Marcus stared at the papers silently while emotion filled his chest. Because for years life had only taken things away from him: money, opportunities, dreams. And now suddenly, one decision on a rainy highway had changed everything. Victoria looked at him carefully before speaking one final time. The world saw a billionaire survive that night, she said quietly. Then she smiled through emotional eyes. But I saw a hero standing in the rain refusing to let a stranger die. And for the first time in years, Marcus finally believed his life could become something bigger than survival.